Today we will discuss the simple mathematical aspects of spectral model. On your Google Classroom, I'll send you a link where you will find a discussion in detail about this spectral model when applied in practice as a global model. It's true that it has some advantages as a numerical method, but since it is a numerical method, so some sort of shortcomings or errors are there. How to overcome that practically, that has been discussed in the literature for which I will send you the link. You can go through that. But here I am not going to any complex things. As per your syllabus, I will just discuss the simple mathematics involved in this model. So let us start. See, the first is general illustration of spectral method. I think you already have gone through the Galerkin method. It is one of the most important Galerkin methods. So let us first discuss spectral method in general. So let us first consider the equation LU equal to Fx, where L is a differential operator, U is a dependent variable, and Fx is a specified forcing function. So L is a differential operator, U is a dependent variable, and Fx is a specified forcing function. You know, if the differential equation involves t as an independent variable, then the forcing function must be a function of t only, not any other variable. Here Fx is a function of only x, not any other variable. So any forcing function means that in a differential equation, a forcing function will contain or will be the function of the independent variable only, and it will not depend upon any other variable. Now let us start how to solve it. Let us suppose that 1 is to be solved in the domain a less than equal to x less than equal to b, and the appropriate boundary conditions are provided. Now this point is very important. In the domain a less than equal to x less than equal to b, you see, when we are going to solve a differential equation, though in our textbooks it is not written that we are to solve that within certain interval. It's not true for all values of x. It is embedded in the way of solving a differential equation that we are to solve it in some particular domain of the independent variable. And especially when we go for numerical solution, we'll have to be restricted within a certain domain or have to be restricted to certain domain. So I start it again. Let us suppose that 1 is to be solved in the domain a less than equal to x less than equal to b, and the appropriate boundary conditions are provided. Let us now consider a series of linearly independent basis functions phi jx such that we can express ux as approximately as summation j equal to 1 to n uj phi jx. Let us now consider a series of linearly independent basis functions. I already discussed in my last class that this is the general idea of Galerkin methods. So we have to find a series of linearly independent basis functions, say phi jx, such that ux can be approximated by summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi j x, where uj is the coefficient for the jth basis function. Now definitely when we are approximating it, definitely there is some error. So whenever you are going to apply any numerical method, you must be very careful about the error incurred, so that it does not go unbounded. Okay, the error or any method, when it is developed, the error is taken into consideration so that it does not amplify. So we come here that the error in satisfying the differential equation 1 with the n terms of the sum 2 is given by, you see the error is given by L summation uj phi j minus fx. That means it was actually, if it were lu minus fx, then this error could have been 0. But since we have approximated u with summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi jx, so some error has occurred, and that is given by 3. Okay. Now the Galerkin procedure requires that the error must be orthogonal to each basis function in the following sense. It is very, very important idea of Galerkin procedure that the error must be orthogonal to each basis function, because I'll at the end of this lecture I will discuss in short what is the importance of orthogonal functions and basis functions. So here our assumption is that the error is orthogonal to each basis function in the following sense, in the sense of 4. That is, integral a to b en phi I dx equal to 0 for I equal to 1 to n. Hence the final form is obtained by substituting 3 into 4, because we have to substitute the form of en from 3 into 4 so that we get this relation. You see, integral a to b, we have put the value of en from 3 into 4 so that we get this equation, integral a to b L of summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi j minus fx whole into phi I dx equal to 0, where I is equal to 1, 2, 3 up to n. We are concentrating on n points, right? Finite number of points, because when we will work with computer, we will have to depend on finite precision mathematics or arithmetic to some extent. So let us see what happens. That implies integral a to b phi I into L summation uj phi j dx minus a to b phi I fx dx equal to 0, and that gives us equation number 5. Substituting 3 into 4, we get the equation number 5. So I again show you what was 3, what was 4, and after substituting 3 into 4, we got this equation. Now I have separated the terms, integral a to b L summation uj phi j into phi I dx minus integral a to b phi I fx dx, which gave birth to equation number 5. So this methodology actually reduces the problem to n algebraic equations that relate the unknown coefficients uj to the transform of the forcing function. I repeat this paragraph. This methodology actually reduces the problem to n algebraic equations that relate the unknown coefficients uj to the transform of the forcing function. From equation 5 it may not be clear to you, but if you take Fourier transform, especially most of the cases Fourier transform is taken. So if you take the Fourier transform of fx, then you will see that this particular methodology actually reduces the problem to n number of algebraic equations which are easier to solve. And this procedure is quite general and can be applied to more dependent and independent variables. This method is a general method, general numerical method that can be applied to more dependent and independent variables. So let us now come to a specific example. How to get equation 5 from a given differential equation. Okay. So example 1 with spectral method. I have given you the reference. You can go through the book written by Haltiner and Williams, Numerical Weather Prediction. There you will get a detailed discussion of this method. If you are interested, you can go through that. But we will just discuss, I repeat, the simple mathematics involved in the method. So let us consider a simple problem in the following form 6. Due to u dx2 equal to fx, and in the domain 0 less than equal to x less than equal to pi. So if you compare this simple problem with the general form of spectral method, then you can easily see that here L is equivalent to the operator d2 dx2. d2 dx2. So we have to solve the equation, differential equation d2u dx2 equal to fx in the domain 0 less than equal to x less than equal to pi, with the boundary conditions that at x equal to 0 u0 is 0 and at x equal to pi u pi is 0. So let us start the spectral method. First and foremost point is to find appropriate basis functions to solve this equation. It is the first and foremost point, an important point. For the spectral method, to choose the appropriate basis functions. And most of the time, when you will do it by hand, you have to choose by inspection. But in other cases, the model itself does it, because the mathematics are embedded there. So let us see what will be the proper choice of basis functions for our problem. You see, I have written here the appropriate one is given by 8. Why? Because you just check. They are orthogonal in the interval 0 less than equal to x less than equal to pi. Moreover, they satisfy the boundary condition 7. Two reasons are there to choose the basis functions phi j as sin jx, because they are orthogonal in the interval 0 less than equal to x less than equal to pi, and they satisfy the boundary conditions 7. Both are to be satisfied. So they are then suitable because they are the orthogonal basis functions. That was the necessity for Galerkin method. So I will show you that they are orthogonal to each other. I am coming to that later, but before that I have shown here that the function phi j equal to sin jx These functions satisfy the boundary conditions. You see, at x equal to 0, phi j is 0. At x equal to pi, phi j is 0. And those were the given boundary conditions. So one part is clear, that the basis functions we have chosen, they satisfy the boundary conditions. Now let us see their orthogonality. So with these basis functions we can write, I have just put the value of uj phi j as summation uj sin jx, because phi j, we have assumed phi j equal to sin jx. So the operator, if you apply the operator L on summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi j, what you get is this. Look at the right hand side, you will get d2 dx2 on the function summation j is equal to 1 to n uj sin jx. Now you can take out summation j is equal to 1 to n uj, because these uj's are actually the coefficients of the jth basis function. So you can take out of the bracket summation j is equal to 1 to n uj, then you have to apply the operator d2 dx2 on sin jx, and that is only the function of x. So you can operate d2 dx2 on sin jx only, not on uj. So it is written as summation j is equal to 1 to n uj d2 dx2 into sin jx. The rest is very simple. Summation j is equal to 1 to n, uj, if you differentiate sin jx once, it will be j cos jx. Now you again operate ddx on that, and finally we get summation j is equal to 1 to n uj minus j square. Don't confuse, it is not minus j whole square, it is minus j square. Minus j square into sin jx. That can be written in the form, finally, that L, when you operating the operator L here d2 dx2 on summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi j, you are getting it as summation j is equal to 1 to n minus j square into uj phi j. Now we will have to go back to our equation 5. Let me show you. This was our equation 5. Now we will put the values here to get a general solution of 5. So 5 becomes, if you just put the values, you will get summation j is equal to 1 to n into minus j square uj into integral 0 to pi, because our, if you remember, the given domain was 0 to pi. So it will be integral 0 to pi phi I phi j x dx, and on the right hand side you will get integral 0 to pi phi I fx dx. Instead of integral a to b, our domain is 0 to pi for I is equal to 1 to n. Thus we get equation 9 from 5. Now we want to see the nature of the product of these basis functions that we have chosen. We want to see, or we want to verify the nature of the basis functions we have chosen. So we are first considering the product of the basis functions. What is it? As you see, 0 to pi sin ix sin jx dx, right? Because 0 to pi phi I phi j dx, phi I means sin ix, phi j means sin jx according to our choice. So the product of the basis functions can be written as 0 to pi sine ix sine jx dx, and I have used simple trigonometric formula to get the term on the right hand side, half into 0 to pi cos I minus jx minus cos I plus jx dx. You know the formula of 2 sine c sine d in terms of cos, and I have simply used that. No trick is there. So let us go to the next step, so that we get 0 to pi sine ix sine jx dx equal to half into, we have separated the terms, 0 to pi cos I minus j dx minus 0 to pi cos I plus j dx. And after integrating we get, as you see, half. From the first term we get half into, half is outside the bracket, 0 to pi cos I minus j dx means sine I minus j x. Just a minute, I have missed the x here, sorry. Please correct it in your PDF file. So we get, I'm coming to this line, that is equal to half into sine I minus jx by I minus j from 0 to pi, and the second one is minus sine I plus jx into I plus j from 0 to pi. So that when I is not equal to j, you get this is equal to 0, because you know the value of sine n pi or cos n pi. Here we have used the idea of sine n pi, and we get when I is not equal to j, then automatically, very simply, we see that this is 0. That means 0 to pi sine ix sine jx dx, that is product of the basis functions, is 0 when I not equal to j. Now let us consider the case when I is equal to j. In that case, we see that I have first calculated the general form. I didn't take the domain. In the last step, I'll put the domain values. Okay. So you see sine ix sine jx dx equal to, we all know I can write it as sine square ix dx because I is equal to j. So I can write it as sine square ix dx, which I can write as half into integral 2 sine square ix dx, and then I have replaced sine square 2 sine square ix by the simple trigonometric formula, that is 1 minus cos 2 ix dx, and after integrating what we get, half into x minus sine 2 ix by 2i. Now let us use the domain for I equal to j. You put the limit of the integral, that is 0 to pi, and see what we get. Now 0 to pi sine ix sine jx dx will be half into x minus sine 2ix by 2i, 0 to pi, and finally it becomes pi by 2. Finally it becomes pi by 2. So what we got finally is this, that the product of the basis functions within the domain, given domain, is 0 if I not equal to j, and it is equal to pi by 2 if I is equal to j. So we can say that they are orthogonal. Therefore we can write 0 to pi sine ix sine jx dx as pi by 2 delta ij, where as usual delta ij is the Kronecker delta function which satisfies the property delta ij is 1 if I is equal to j, and it is 0 if I not equal to j. You all know that. Now it's an important point to be noted. It is to be noted that equation 10 is merely the orthogonality condition that arises since the integral vanishes except when I equal to j. So the basic necessities of Galerkin method are satisfied, that the basis functions we have chosen, they are orthogonal basis functions. They are orthogonal basis functions. We have just checked that integral 0 to pi sine ix sine jx dx is pi by 2 into delta ij. So equation 10 is nothing but the orthogonality condition that arises since the integral vanishes except when I equal to j. So using 10, the solution to 9, using 10, the solution to 9, let us go back to 9. Which equation was our 9? This one was our 9. Now using this orthogonality properties of basis functions, we are going to solve 9 with the help of 10. How? Don't forget, this 0 to pi phi I phi j dx has a value only when I is equal to j. Otherwise, all the remaining terms vanish for I not equal to j. So finally what we get is this. This one. Minus I square u 0 to pi sine square ix dx equal to 0 to pi phi I fx dx. I have written in the bracket the reason, that is since j equal to I, only one term exists and all other terms vanish. So finally we got 11 as the solution of the problem 1. That is, we have found out ui. I want to mention one more point here. You look at here, or look at 9, anywhere. Which one is to be found? Which one is to be found? Which is our unknown thing? That is, I go back here. Our original equation was of the form LU equal to Fx, where Fx is a specified forcing function and U is a dependent variable. And we have tried to express in 2, as you see. In 2, we have taken the approximate form of Ux. So finally what happens, phi j x we have chosen. So if we can find uj and take the sum over j equal to 1 to n, we can get ux from 2. So our main objective was to find u, to find the dependent variable u. But we have expressed that variable, or we have assumed that approximation of that variable as summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi jx, and phi jx is our choice. So what remains is this, to find uj, and that we have found in example 1. In 11, we see that we have got the value of ui or uj, whatever you see, as 2 by minus 2 by I square pi 0 to pi phi I fx dx. If the phi I is known to us, if fx is given, the forcing function, then taking Fourier transform of them, from this equation we will get a set of algebraic equations which are or which I should say which can be solved in an easier way and get the values of ui, right? That was our objective. You remember, to get ux we have to find the coefficients uj or ui, because the other part, the basis function, is our choice according to our problem. So we have found out ui, so we can say that the problem is solved since fx is not specifically given. It will depend upon the problem and it will vary from problem to problem. Now, one point you see here, each coefficient is proportional to finite Fourier transform of the forcing function, so that if fx can be completely represented with the finite set of basis functions, the solution exists. That's what I just told you. If we know fx and if we take the Fourier transform, then we can easily get the solutions ui. But here I will ask you to concentrate on this note. That is, in this example, both the error in the solution and the error in the differential equation are orthogonal to the basis functions. In this particular example, both the error in the solution and the error in the differential equation are orthogonal to the basis functions, so that all of the errors is outside the description ux equal to summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi jx. I think you have noticed here I have used the sign of equality instead of approximately equal. You look at here, I have used the sign of equality instead of sign of approximation, because the reason is this, that in this particular example the error in the solution and the error in the differential equation are orthogonal to the basis function. Both are orthogonal to the basis functions, and as a result all of the errors is outside this domain. In this domain we know that both the error and in the solution and the error itself in the differential equation, original equation, are orthogonal to the basis functions. Let me explain a bit more that why is it happening. Because you see, you look at this line, this is because L phi I is actually d2 dx to sin ix, that is ultimately equal to minus I square phi I. You can easily see that here. So L, when you are operating the operator L on phi I, you are getting minus I square phi I. What does it mean? It means that L phi I is proportional to phi I, so that if the error is orthogonal to L phi I, it will be orthogonal to phi I also. Right? You look at the last equation of page 8 and you see L phi I is equal to minus I square phi I. That means L phi I is proportional to phi I. Finally, what does it mean? What does it indicate? That L phi I is proportional to phi I, so that if the error is orthogonal to L phi I, that will be also proportional to phi I. Very simple to follow. So this will be, but there is one point. This will be true when certain other linear equations are treated with a spectral method. Linear equations. Please note that. When certain other linear equations, not all, but certain other linear equations are treated with the spectral method. In those cases also you can show that this property, that the error in the solution and the error in the differential equation are orthogonal, both are orthogonal to the basis function. Both the error that was already embedded in the differential equation and the error you have got in the solution, numerical solution, both these errors are orthogonal to the basis functions. It is true that in certain other linear equations can also be treated like this, but look at here. But it will not generally be true. It may or may not be true with nonlinear equations. But it will, rather to say, it may or may not be true with nonlinear equations. And to get rid of this problem, of this situation, we have numerical weapons in our hand, not the actual weapons, but numerical methods are there. That is not our, that is out of scope in this text. But you should know that the method we have just discussed will serve our purpose for certain other linear equations, but usually not for nonlinear equations. Okay, so I come to another example. Let me drink some water. Just a minute. Excuse me. Sorry for the disturbance. So let us start example 2 with spectral method. Similar type of equation, but you see here the boundary conditions are a bit different. Here the equation is d2u dx2 equal to fx in the domain 0 less than equal to x less than equal to pi. I have named it 6a because our first problem it was 6. It is a similar type problem, but the boundary conditions are a bit different. What are the boundary conditions here? Du dx at x equal to 0 and du dx at x equal to pi, both are 0. Not the original function, but its first derivative at x equal to 0 and x equal to pi vanishes. First derivative, not the original function. So now I think you are intelligent enough to guess what will be the basis function here. What will be the basis function here? I know if it were a live class you could have given me the answer. It's not very tough to guess. And I think you have already guessed it and correctly guessed it. That is, the suitable basis function by inspection, here it will be cos jx, so that the boundary conditions are satisfied, and later we will see its orthogonality property. So with these basis functions we will proceed as usual, so that we get L summation j is equal to 1 to n uj phi j as this one, summation j is equal to 1 to n minus j square into uj phi j. Now in this case our original equation, don't forget, our original equation that we have to solve is actually 5. So let me remind you 5 again. In page 3, this is our equation 5. At the top of the page 3, you see, it is the equation 5. So our main aim or main objective is to solve this equation, right? Well, in our case, we have chosen phi j and L is given, only we don't know fx, right? We don't know the exact form of fx, but L is known, phi j is known. So our main objective is to find here, from here also, uj by solving 5. So let us see what happens here. We were in this page 10. On this page we were there. So in this case, you see, 5 becomes this one. It's not very tough to understand, okay? It becomes this for I equal to 1 to n, and I have called it 9a because I named such equation as 9 in example 1. Now our next duty is to take the product of the basis functions. Product of the basis functions. We have to check their orthogonality. You see, that means here it will be 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx. Now we should apply some known properties that we know from trigonometry and integration. I mean the integration of trigonometric functions. That is minus integral minus pi to plus pi cos ix cos jx dx can be written as 2 into 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx. Why? Because cos ix cos jx are even functions and their product is also an even function. So instead of taking the limit from minus pi to plus pi, we can take 2 0 to pi integral 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx, and it can be shown that integral 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx equal to 0 when I not equal to j, and minus pi to plus pi. Please note the limits of the integrals. First one is 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx equal to 0 when I not equal to j, but our original integral was this minus, just a minute, yeah, what I have done here, 0 to pi, right. Our original was 0 to pi, but 0 to pi should be the actual domain. So we have used the properties only, where minus pi to plus pi can be replaced by 0 to pi. So here also, in the first case, when I not equal to j, we can show that 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx equal to 0, and we can also show that minus pi to plus pi cos ix cos jx dx equal to pi when I not equal to j not equal to 0. Okay, this is important here. You should not write only I not equal to j, but which ultimately gives us 0 to pi integral 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx equal to pi by 2 delta ij. The symbols have their usual meanings, and I call it equation number 10a. So almost we are done. Using 10a, first I come to the last line of page 12, that is using 10a, the solution to 9a becomes this one, because the method is similar. I think I don't have to repeat it. You just use it and you will get 11a, which gives us the solution of solutions for ui. Solutions for ui, and the rest is same as before. Whatever you want to show, the calculations, etc., in detail, that is same as example 1, but still I did the calculations here. Since it is not live class, I could have asked you in the class to do the calculations, but since it is not a live class, that is the problem. Anyway, you look at the calculations. 0 to pi cos ix cos jx dx can be written as usual using the formulas. It is very easy to do. For I not equal to j, it is 0, and when I is equal to j, then it is pi by 2. But one point I should have written here. I equal to j, but they are not 0. It is important because we are using cosine function. So finally we get the solution. Now I will take 2-3 minutes more to give you some idea about the mathematical preliminaries. Maybe some of you remember that, some of you don't. So let me help you to recall these results. That importance of orthogonal functions and basis functions. Importance of orthogonal functions and basis functions. To know its importance, we must know what is orthogonal collection. A collection of functions, you see, phi 0x, phi 1x, phi mx, and so on, defined on a closed interval AB, is called orthogonal on AB if the inner product can be written as integral a to b phi ix phi jx dx is equal to 0 when I not equal to j. When I not equal to j, it will be 0. So one point we have here already shown it. For I not equal to j, this is 0 always. You see here, or you see in the first example. When I is not equal to j, then this integral value of the integral is 0. And this is the definition of orthogonal collection. I mean orthogonal collection of some functions, phi 0x, phi 1x, etc. They will be called orthogonal, the set will be called orthogonal, and if integral a to b phi ix phi jx dx is 0 when I not equal to j. Number 2, orthogonal functions and linear dependence. An orthogonal set of non-zero vectors is always linearly independent. I told you in my last class, so far I remember in my last lecture, that if there is one theorem in linear algebra called extension theorem, which states that a set of linearly independent vectors can be extended to a basis. Can be extended to a basis. I repeat, the extension theorem states that a set of linearly independent vectors can be extended to a basis. Now you can find the link. You see, this theorem is stating that an orthogonal set of non-zero vectors is linearly independent, and since they are linearly independent, they can be extended to a basis. So now you understand the importance of orthogonal functions and basis and their relation. Why we took the basis functions as orthogonal? Because orthogonal set of non-zero vectors is linearly independent, and we know that any set of linearly independent vectors can be extended to a basis. So that relates the two. Okay, and there is another, you may find another terminology in some books, that is orthonormal set of vectors. What is it? The same thing, but here is one difference. A given set of unit vectors u1, u2, u3, uk that satisfies that satisfies the orthogonality sorry I repeat, orthonormal set of vectors is a set such that it consists of unit vectors u1, u2, u3, uk that satisfies the orthogonality condition. So the difference is this: orthogonality condition will be satisfied by the vectors u1, u2, u3, uk, but they will be called orthonormal if they are unit vectors, right? So sometimes instead of orthogonal set of vectors in dynamic metrology, to solve an equation we need orthonormal set of vectors also. Now I come to some simple notes, and this is almost your higher secondary mathematics. You just to remind you, I have noted some results, that is fx defined on some interval, closed interval minus pp is even if f of minus x is fx, and it is odd in that interval if f of minus x is minus fx, that you all know. And if fx is even, then minus p2 plus p fx dx can be written as 2 into 0 to p fx dx. That result we have just used in our example. Number 3, if fx is odd, in that case integral minus p to p fx dx is 0. So we saw that the functions we took into consideration were even functions, cosine functions. And finally, the last page, property 4 is, please remember, if you take the product of two functions and two functions are both are even, I mean individually they are even functions, both are even functions, then their product is also even. Very important result to be applied. Next one, if one is even, the other is odd, then their product is odd. And if both of them are odd, their product is even. Very important results to be applied in solving the differential equations by specially numerical methods. So don't forget that. And these are written in a very compact form in the reference given here, the following reference. I have just listed some results, but the results, orthogonal functions and Fourier series, their relations, their importance, all are described in the note of Gabbard. And you all know what Fourier transform is. Later we will discuss it in a bit more detail, but I think you all know that Fourier transform means it is a function derived from a given function and representing it by a series of sinusoidal functions. Sinusoidal functions. And the link I will give you in your classroom, you will see when we are going to apply spectral method, uh, in global grid, what problems arise? Because most of the atmospheric motions are wave-like motions, we know, and there you can see what sort of problems may crop up while using this uh, method to solve the global models. There we have to incorporate another part to help rather a spectral model to solve the situation depending on the grids, and the information at the grids, which is most important, that you should know the information at the grid points. I mean atmospheric parameters you should know, or global parameters, and there the problem arises, and in the link you will find how they are managed. Okay, so I stop here.